We had, okay, we got it. That's okay. So we had, in that year, we had 162,000 pounds of phosphorus, 3.3 million pounds of nitrogen, and 35 million pounds of TSS, which is total suspended solids. So all of that comes to the estuaries and of course isn't good. Particularly nitrogen is not good for the estuaries. Phosphorus more affects the lake. But the basin runoff south, if you see the big arrow south, the Everglades agricultural area basin runoff to the Everglades goes through the STAs and takes that capacity. So they're comparatively to the 114 billion gallons, which went from the lake that year. Next slide, please. As you know, here's the canal in red, C44 canal built in 2016 to 26 and improved on as they built the dike in 1930s. And that's the C44 canal that connects the South Fork of the St. Lucie estuary. And the black lines are, as you're familiar with, C23, C24, and you can't see it at the top, but that's C25 that goes out to the Indian River Lagoon. As you can see, those canals do not connect to the lake. There was actually a process years ago of C131, which if you look at the corner of C23 and 24, they had the Corps had proposed in the flood control project to put a connection between Lake Okeechobee and that corner where C23, 24 is. Fortunately, we got that deauthorized many years ago, but interesting. Okay, next, please. As you know, there's the C44 lock and dam structure on the top, and then the 7 gates of hell on the south. Those are the structures that dump billions of gallons a day from the lake on the west, on the right, to the estuary on the left. Next slide, please. And here's what it does. Environmental impacts, human impacts, and also economic impacts to our oyster reefs, seagrass beds, all the habitat. We need to move forward. There we go. One more. There we go. And our nearshore coral reefs, which are right outside the St. Lucie Inlet. You've seen those major plumes by Jackie and Ed who fly over and see that. Next slide. Good. Okay, good. This is some of the kind of restoration efforts and work, but it shows the estuary and kind of where oyster reefs are in the middle estuary. In the outer estuary, those sandbars, you can see about 400 acres of seagrass area, which is now mostly bare sand bottom. Next slide, please. And this is what it does when those discharges happen. Here's that typical year of when that happened in 18, with the salinities at Roosevelt Bridge here are normally 20, 25 parts per thousand, which is ideal for oysters, drops down to below that threshold of 10 parts per thousand. That causes stress, harm, and death to juveniles as well as adult oysters. And if it lasts for a long duration of more than that 28 days, which obviously it did in this case, 127 days, we are killing our oysters. Next slide, please. Same with seagrass in the outer estuary. This is a seagrass that are impacted. This is an old graphic in the top left from the Water Management District. They used to present on a monthly basis, but it showed the occurrence of percent occurrence of seagrass in the Willoughby Creek and Boy Scout Island areas they monitored. And then you can see when the light gray line is when the discharges happen. Then you can see the drops in salinity and the drop in seagrass coverage, particularly Johnson seagrass, which was a threatened species that's been delisted. Next, there we go. Is seagrass tolerance has the same kind of salinity tolerance. If it gets below 10 or 15 parts per thousand for a long duration, it causes disaster to the seagrass beds. Next slide, please. And this is kind of a result Todd Thurlow helped me work out. We worked out some graphics to figure out the loss in seagrass over looking at aerials over time, and went from 405 acres down to about 218. And we haven't done assessments since around then, but you can tell the difference in the 2010 to the left, 2017 to the right, that comparison. And then growing up around here, I recall these flats were thick with seagrass. All 7 species we had, and it was thick with about 1.5 foot thick seagrass. And it's amazing how much we've lost of that habitat. Next. And as you know, the discharges go out the inlet and across our coral reefs. We're at the northern limit for hard and soft corals in the St. Lucie Inlet Preserve Reef, which is just south of the St. Lucie Inlet. So in the clear photo to the upper right, you can see that. I saw that Jackie posted some good ones from Ed that showed that clear reef to which extends down. But when we get that plume of nasty water, that lower left, you can see how far offshore it goes, 6 or 8 miles. Next slide. And this is the muck and silt and sediment it brings to our bottom. So over 7.9 million cubic yards exist on the bottom of the St. Lucie, which can get stirred up by winds and tides. And even if we don't have a discharge from from Lake Okeechobee, we can still get, 7.9 million cubic yards of muck is stirred up and causes turbidity and covers over habitat. So if you throw your anchor out in the middle channel, this is what you pick up. It's like a flocculent ooze. And it's like thick black mayonnaise. Next slide. And this is from Joan Browder years ago. We were monitoring the fish lesions and abnormalities. This goes way back to 1980s when we had the 1998 events. They asked about fish with lesions, and I recall back, and FDEP put this together to show that we've had at least 8 different events where we've had fish with lesions and abnormalities that correlated specifically with discharges from Lake Okeechobee. Next slide, please. And here we are with the famous Landsat image that Todd Thurlow sent me on, brought attention to on July 2nd, 2016, when over 239 square miles of Lake Okeechobee were covered with this blue-green algae. That was kind of amazing to us that, wow, how could that happen? And what's it going to do when they open the gates? Next slide. And here's kind of that, since that event in 2004, 2005, we monitored kind of discharge events that again are correlated to about 9 different events with blue-green algae and the billions of gallons there that comes out with these major discharges. Sure. So this is showing from 1995 to 2013. And actually, we expanded out one graphic to 2016 when we had a major bloom after 2013. This is, again, the data showing the amount of discharges. So the big tall bars obviously are showing the lake releases to St. Lucie estuary in red. The C44 basin runoff and other discharges are in blue. So they're at the lower bars that you can see. But it kind of indicates very quickly to the eye that, when we had these major bloom events and major discharge events. Paul? Yep. Question. Right. Yeah, so we can document a little more if we can get it, and we can certainly update the graph. And it doesn't go past 2013, but we ought to get it going through there. Next slide, please. Kind of the last one, I think. As you know, here's the health warnings that are posted around our estuary during these times. 2004 was the first time that I have ever seen it in my history here around the estuary. These algae blooms coming into the system and were staying in the St. Lucie as long as the fresh water was there. And they all came from the lake, these 9 different events. And of course, we post the interesting poster I gave to Carl Wickstrom, actually, that have you been slimed in the middle? That was put out by FDEP. Interesting poster. If you get close to read it, it says, they just wanted to know, have you been slimed by this algae and what's going on? Are you healthy? Are you okay? And then the one on the right was posted in the Cleveland Health Clinics and all the Martin Memorial clinics to want to know, have you been exposed to the algae and do you have these symptoms of coughing, respiratory problems, or these different symptoms? And they were for a long time documenting that exposure. I think Dr. Romano was involved in that too, when I remember. Last slide, I guess. Next slide. No more. Okay, that's it. Great. So not a very good picture to paint, but the idea of, these toxic algae blooms are going to possibly happen when the conditions are right. The water temperatures are high, the nutrient loading gets high with rain and runoff coming into the lake. And if they have to open those gates, they're going to come out. Now, the Corps has paid recent attention to, a lot of even legislation that's being put forward to say, hey, Corps of Engineers, you got to consider if there are toxic algae blooms, you have to hold off on these discharges to the St. Lucie estuary for health purposes and other reasons. So there's things in the works for that. So we're going to move on to our next speaker. We got City of Stewart. No, we've got Rob, right? Government, no. Yes, Rob Lord. Thanks, sorry. I had to put my glasses on to read. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. See if I can get this set up. I'm out of practice. I'm honored to be here today to speak. I have spoken at these meetings before on multiple occasions. Every time in my capacity as president and CEO of Martin Health System and then Cleveland Clinic. By the way, every time I came here before, I came here in a wool suit, a long sleeve shirt, a tie wrapped. It was always in the summertime because we always had a problem. And I was really envious of all of you people. And I just want to call that out today. My attire is for, I retired as of the 1st of this year. I want to stay involved. I'm very proud to Mark Perry and the Florida Oceanographic Society invited me to become a member of their board of directors, and I'm honored to do that. Been an admirer of Mark for a long, long time, and then I'm also on the Vote Water board, admirer of Blair and Carl before that, and longtime subscriber to Florida Sportsman magazines. That was a big honor, and I want to make it also very clear that those organizations have done some great things, have grown dramatically, and I have I take no credit whatsoever for any of that, and I deserve none. Why I'm here today is because in 2016 we had a horrific algae bloom, and then again in 2018, and I felt compelled in my role as president and CEO of the hospital, as the local not-for-profit health system that should be looking out after the health of the community. In addition to taking care of episodes of care, we ought to be concerned about the overall public health. And I felt like we needed to speak out about the public health risks that were being caused by that algae bloom. We had hundreds of patients locally. That is not an exaggeration. Hundreds of patients that came to physicians' offices or urgent care centers, and in the most severe cases to the hospital. And they complained of it, as Mark pointed out in that poster that was up there. We had that posted in the emergency room. We modeled the program after what we had done with Ebola, on how we were going to seek information right away. Notify us immediately if you've been in contact with the river. And if that happened, then patients were asked a series of additional questions about the nature of the contact so that we could treat them most effectively. And in my view, it was a frightening situation for our community. We're surrounded by water. It's one of the things that makes us a great place to live. And yet, anytime you got near that water, you were at risk. And it demanded that we speak out as an advocate for public health, and we demand some action. We weren't the only area affected and have not been the only area affected by this, but I am mindful of the fact that I'm the only hospital president that ever stood up and took a stand on this. And that confused me because I was told it was risky. Oh, if you do that, Rob, yeah, that's dangerous territory. You're getting political. And I said, it's not politics, it's public health. And if that crosses over with a political thing, then so be it. But we've got to talk about public health, do something about this. And what happened was I had the overwhelming support of the community. I have yet to experience a negative consequence of taking that stand. I saw, as I look back on it now, what I learned was there was really very little risk in it at all. There were a few people out maybe in the central part of the state that pointed out that Joe Negron, that was at the time, if you remember, SB 10, buy the land. And Senator Negron, our local senator, was president of the Senate, and we were trying to get that passed. And we had a press conference. We held it out on the helipad. I think I know Jackie. I think at one point you got some video of that and shared that, and that got legs, and other people saw it, and it became a very positive thing. But when I look back at this, something I wanted to say today, because I think it's really important, is but for 2016 and 2018. I might not be here today, but for those algae blooms, because that is what made me take a step, said, I've got to do something in this role. And what hit me was these events strengthened this movement. Okay, it created a crisis. And it brought new people to the table. That could make a difference. I like to think I'm one of them. But the fact is, without that, it probably doesn't happen. So it brings new people to participate in a meaningful way. And the next thing you know, you're growing, and you wind up with a congressman in Brian Mast, who this is his main, it seems to be his main issue. And I like Congressman Mast. I consider him a friend. I know him and his family, but I will also guarantee you this is smart politics. And it's smart politics because of the strength of this effort. Okay. And when Governor DeSantis vetoes House Bill 2508, I hope I get the number right. That's because it's smart politics, folks. And that's because of the strength of this movement and how we grew. Now, when I look back at the last 5 years or so, a lot has been accomplished. We've made more progress. It's incremental, and I know people get frustrated all the time. It's not enough. They didn't set aside enough for reservoirs or whatever the issue is, whatever your concern. But we're making incremental improvement, and we have the attention of people politically, and we get vetoes of legislation like this, which I have to admit to you, I was surprised. That was legislation that passed the Senate on an overwhelming vote. But there's still much to do. We are one bad hurricane season away from a disaster. I'm supposed to talk about public health. Okay, people that come here, if you get exposed to this, we wind up with a respiratory we heard the list of things: respiratory problems, digestive problems, nausea, vomiting, eye irritations, rashes, skin. All these sorts of things happen. But people look at that and say, well, it didn't kill anybody. Well, the answer is to that, I don't know how many people it's going to kill, but is there anybody that's going to suggest that exposure to these chemicals is going to have good long-term health consequences? I don't know anybody's taking that position. You will hear people say we need to study it more. And my response to that is we know enough already to know that it won't be good. It's just a question of how bad, not whether or not it will be bad from a long-term standpoint. And that would be my message to you. Nothing has really changed in terms of our vulnerability. We get a lot of rain comes to this area. We get some tropical weather systems that dump a bunch of rain on us. There's no choice but to empty out Lake Okeechobee, and there's no choice about where that water goes until we improve the system. Every bit of available evidence suggests to me we know enough to know we don't need further study before we take action. Last thing I'd like to touch on, since you've given me the floor, is my biggest fear is complacency. We've been really lucky the last few years. And it's natural human behavior to take your eye off the ball when that happens. You got other things to worry about. And the question is, will we lose the momentum that we established in 2016, 2018, and thereafter, continue to have today? Will we become complacent? Maybe more importantly, it's not the people in this room I'm so worried about, it's the people out there in our community. Because it's strength in numbers. The reason that this becomes a smart political move to support these things is because a lot of people support our efforts. We need to, in my view, the most important thing we can do is feed the message that we want to feed. There's a lot of organizations represented here today, and they have different angles and different slants and different requirements. They have different statuses, but they all have one overarching thing. But we should be feeding the mission and vision of every one of these organizations to as many people as we can, to get as many people inspired as we can to get involved and to become vocal supporters. We should educate our community, give them resources so that they can become better advocates and be inspired to take action. And then finally, what I would suggest to you is every message should have this overarching message. Our local waters are fragile, and they face significant man-made challenges that can result in disaster. Mankind created these problems, and we owe a duty to try to fix it and stop it. Our quality of life depends on that. And we must let science and the engineering tell us what is possible to preserve our environment, not special interest groups. And then we must follow that rigorously and improve what we have. I've taken too much of your time. I thank you all very, very much. I'm honored to be here. And yes, sir.
Now, I think there was a new release that they just put out. That they found, I think it's Lou Gehrig's disease.
Mhm.
Is associated with the allergy.
Yes, there are connections to a number of neurodegenerative conditions that it relates to. But what you have is what the opponents would say if you start citing that, and we should cite it, but they'll say, well, that's inconclusive, or it's not no true causal relationship has been proven, et cetera, et cetera. Reminds me of the debate, I think I mentioned this years ago here, reminds me of the debate that occurred in the 1960s about cigarettes. But there really never was a debate about whether or not it was good or bad. It was how bad is it? Yes, sir.
I'd just like to point out that when some of us get this question and this doubtfulness as to the data, we do have a canary in the mine, to use that expression, and the effect on dogs. So obviously, if dogs are so sensitive, that can't be a good thing. Maybe we have a liver that happens to work a little bit better than dogs, but the point is that this indicates something is wrong.
Absolutely. And I don't know why that triggered me to say this. A couple of things I used to say when I do that, I still should say this. I'm not a doctor. I'm a lawyer by training. Please forgive me. No offense. I'm a recovering lawyer. But I'm a proud lawyer. But the fact is, I admit that I'm not good on the science. I do think I'm fairly good at the advocacy part of some of this, and I have done a lot of that. And I think that's what that to me, it has been, or I hope I can add something. I hope we all can add something. I think we really do need to focus on that advocacy aspect of this, because that was really effective. But again, it's more effective when there's a crisis going on and all the news channels are broadcasting. Yeah, but it's a little different. I just don't. I want to go back to that one thing. I touched on it, and Blair and I've talked about it a good bit. If perhaps any other person who's in a similar professional situation to what I was in during my career were to look at this and think, I'd like to take a stand, but I'm worried about the consequences, give me a call. You know, and I would leave you with this, that effort, getting to know you better, getting to understand the issues better. I got inspired to, this is the thing I want to do in my retirement to try and make a difference. And there's a lot of other things. I had other opportunities, and I still do, and I'll do other things. But this is the thing that I was inspired, because I think there's a chance that we can do great things and accomplish great things here. Thank you very much.
And now, Mayor Matheson, for cities moving back, your perspective. Thank you, Mark. Government responses.
Brought a couple props. Hi, everyone. I'm Merritt Matheson, Mayor of the City of Stewart. I'm going to talk to you about a couple facts that were just stated and government response as far as local government and on up as far as what can happen this summer. You know, as Rob stated, I've stated, we all know here we are, we're a little below 13 feet, 12.9. Frankly, we all know it's in Mother Nature's hands right now. Most everyone knows the capacities of the system, and we're one bad hurricane season away from the district and the Corps having no good choices of what to do. But there's a couple just standard givens. We don't need to debate whether blue-green algae containing microcystin is good or bad, or how bad it is for you. It's bad. And it's advisable not to be around it. It's bad for animals. It's bad for humans. It's bad for the overall environment in a high concentrated bloom like that. And we don't need to debate whether or not local governments or nonprofit hospitals or local environmental agencies should get the message out. That's our job. You know, it might impact a business, a guide for that summer. And, you know, they might get a short-term benefit, one more extra charter, you know, one more restaurant at a waterfront table because someone didn't know that it was bad. But the long-term future of not getting that message out and the failure of local governments or hospitals for not advising people is so much worse. That type of stuff is not debatable. Governments, hospitals, nonprofits have to make long-term decisions on what's best for the overall community in the long term. And so it's quite clear. Toxic algae blooms are bad. If there is potential, you get the message out as best you possibly can. So how does that messaging work? You know, we can all watch the discharges. There's been blooms in the lake. Right now, we're lucky enough we're not getting any water from the lake. And we will do everything we can to keep it that way. The DEP is in charge of testing. Everyone in this room and everyone listening can be helpful to be the eyes and ears. You can go on the DEP's website. They have a toxic algae dashboard. That also has GIS imagery in it of where a location of a visual algae bloom was seen. And a form you can fill out and send directly to the DEP. That's our job. That's everyone's job. If you see it, report it. The more reports of the same area, good. We need to highlight it, report it. They're the overarching agency. They work with our local health department to put up proper signage. Over the past few years, we all know our history, that signage has gotten better and more consolidated. And those discussions have occurred on what the sign should look like. Because what we don't want to do is put signs up and have people ignore them and be complacent about them. So our signage is now consistent. City of Stuart will work with the health department. City of Stuart, myself, are in discussions with our staff about potential precautionary signage. But that's a fine line. You don't want to dilute the real warning signs when a visual bloom has been seen. And so, let me show you. This was put up in 2016. At that time, we didn't have too many consistent signage, as some of the slides Mark showed out with the DEP, have you been slimed? We have come a long way. This wasn't consistent with our health department or the DEP. This was a reaction. It was a good reaction, but consistency is a little better. So this is the important sign right now. City of Stuart, Martin County, the DEP, our health department. If there's a visual bloom and a buildup of toxic algae, you should see this sign. If it's reported back that it's toxic, if there's a visual bloom, report it. And on the DEP's dashboard, you can see if someone else has reported it and if it's been tested. But this is the sign you really want to pay attention to. Now we're having that discussion at the city about potential cautionary signs. You know, if we're receiving high volume discharges that are projected to go on for a little while, but those would be cautionary signs letting residents know about high volume discharges and the potential. This is the sign where if you're a parent or a dog owner or anyone, you want to use extreme caution around the water. So consistency is incredibly important in our signage. We know where we stand, but proper messaging is all the agencies' jobs. I want to take this opportunity, though, to touch on a couple things, and I can't stress how important and how thankful I am for Mark, for Brad of Everglades Foundation, for Jim Moyer of Indian River Keeper and Captains for Clean Water, of all of us coming together to host the Army Corps a week or so ago, and how important it is to get those agencies, those decision makers on the water. Some of the comments, but there's been plenty of talk about our waterways, but the Corps has a turnover, a predictable turnover. And getting those people on the water for all of us to be able to talk to them on a boat and discuss the history, put faces to the decisions they might have to make, and have conversations that you might not have a chance to when you're on a boat with someone, spending time pointing different things out. That's when you really start to open up. Right now, the Army Corps is studying sediment discharges out of the S-77 structure going into the Caloosahatchee. And one of the conversations we got to have with General Kelly was about sediment discharges out of the S-80 and the impacts that has. Again, our position is always zero regulatory discharges. But if we absolutely have to have them, what if at that, no other option, at least we got discharges through a structure that was designed to give us zero sediments. Another really important conversation we got to have with Colonel Booth and General Kelly was their congressional mandates. The Corps is directed and has certain mandates: navigation, recreation, water supply, preservation and enhancement of fish and wildlife, and flood control. Flood control. What does that really mean, though? Flood control to someone's residence, their house? You could prioritize that really high on flood control. But what if you had to break down and make a decision between flooding two different things? Flooding agricultural land or flooding an estuary. Both are going to reverberate and have different business impacts. Can you think about flooding an estuary and look back at the damages it's caused on us? And can you balance those two? Conversations like that are why it's truly important for us to openly host our government agencies out there and get the people that have been doing this day in, day out for generations to show them our local perspective. So I'll leave that, or if there's any questions.
Within the estuary one on this section, can you need the microphone because then people can't hear you.
Do you want to get?
Want to ask a question? We can repeat the question.
Yeah, I live in the estuary, that's the north of the shore, and we have retention ponds. I wonder if the retention ponds are as vulnerable or very vulnerable to the same toxins that are along the river. This is so close to the river, but I'm not familiar with retention ponds and how they work.
So repeat the question.
So the question was retention ponds in North River Shores, water retention ponds, or any other area. Are they vulnerable to toxic algae blooms? And the answer is yes. They're not going to be correlated to a bloom happening in our waterways. But if the conditions are right, it doesn't have to be in the St. Lucie estuary to have a toxic algae bloom. These similar blooms have been documented all over the country and all over the world. So, thank you.
Thank you. Blair Wickstrom going to talk about sort of public rallies, public situations.
All right, again, Blair Wickstrom, a board member here, and we discussed on what should we do regarding these sort of eventualities of potentially getting a discharge. And Charles said, well, we shouldn't treat this as we're expecting to get a discharge and we should be somehow complacent with it. And as we already heard, we shouldn't be. And so again, today's meeting is more like what you would do at the Hurricane Center in Miami. You know, you're going to potentially get a hurricane. You should be ready for it. And we already discussed on some of the things that we should be doing. One of the things also is how we react as a community. And so maybe for right now, for this exercise, can everybody stand up? And I'll give you a hint. The answer is 0. All right. So everybody standing. What do we want regarding discharges? What do we want? No, we're going to go 0, 0. What do we want? When do we want it? All right, so we're getting it. What do we want? 0. When do we want it? All right, we're going to do this last time. I think we've got everybody now. I think we've got everybody. What do we want is 0 discharges. When do we want it?
Yes, never.
Never, ever.
We want 0 discharges now or never. Do we want never instead of now? Well, we're still getting discharges. We want 0 now. All right, 0 now. Are we good with that? Mark says that. All right, let's try it one last time. What do we want? When do we want it? There you go. All right, so you guys can sit down. You've passed. Again, the idea of community organizing, getting people together to demonstrate a sort of just a community organizing against something, it's going on all over the world. This isn't a novel thing. It's not new. It's not anything that's, not even new to this issue. In 2013, a Facebook event was posted, just an event with a date by 2 people that didn't have really skin in the game. They didn't have a lot of background in the issue, but as mentioned earlier, the house was on fire and thousands of people, 3,000 to 5,000 people showed up at Phipps Park and marched on the locks. And that was by, essentially just creating one Facebook post for an event. And then it followed up with, again, people that went out and by hundreds, maybe even close to 1,000, spelling out words, buy the land, save our river on the beaches. The river warriors, we had people that would get up on the causeways and again, they were demonstrating frustration with how our waterway was being treated. In the end, did it mean a lot? Did it do a lot? I have to think it did, with Rob Lord and what he said earlier. But we have to do more. And I think for you guys here, if there's a way that we can help organize your communities, other members of Rivers Coalition, we need to be ready to mobilize and show the community through support, through public support, that hopefully we're not going to take this any longer and to get the attention of people that are sort of on the sidelines of this issue. And as we're seeing all across the world right now, that type of activity makes a difference. And it's not going to do it on its own. It's going to have to take what Gil's going to talk about next. It's going to have to take all of us communicating with our family and our neighbors, but the community part of it can't be understated. And so I just wanted to leave you with that, and we'll move to the next phase of making sure people find out that this isn't right and it shouldn't be happening.
We'll hear from Gil Smart.
Hi, all. Gil Smart with Vote Water, but I'm speaking today in my former capacity. I was a journalist for 32 years. And in fact, the algae crisis of 2016 was the first big story, one of the first big stories I covered when I came here. I came down here in late 2015, and a couple months later, all of a sudden we were having massive rains, which led to massive discharges, which led to guacamole thick algae. And I wrote about it. I wrote about it incessantly. We at TC Palm Stewart News, we covered the story incessantly because it was a huge story. And so our coverage both reflected, I think, the public outrage that existed at the time, but also helped amplify it. Okay, through the stories that we were telling, through the images that we were publishing, you know, in the paper and online, it really gave sort of a very expansive view of what was happening, and it helped the attention helped draw policymakers to the story, to what was happening. And it really helped, I think, ultimately get Senate Bill 10 passed. Okay, you have to, because it's not, as 2013 maybe showed, public outrage tends to not be enough unless it can be sort of amplified. You know what I mean? Because if, a group of people get together and protest something, policymakers can kind of ignore that and just say, well, but if all of a sudden the press starts asking questions about it and publishing photos about it, and that generates additional interest and additional coverage and additional photos, then it becomes sort of a snowball effect. So if this happens again, I mean, I think everybody who's part of an organization here, be it, an HOA, condo association, a group such as Vote Water, or whatnot, all of us ought to be asking ourselves, if this happens now, what do we have to say about it? What are we going to say about this? What is our message going to be? Because there needs to be something beyond "I'm angry," and I would put this out there. What is your ask? In 2016, we were asking to send it south, buy the land. We had a specific ask that policymakers could act on. If it happens this time around, what's our ask? What specifically are we asking for? Asking for the floodgates to be closed. Well, but that creates more water in the lake, and then that could compromise the dike, and the Army Corps is not going to do that. What are we asking for? I just want to plant that seed, because that's not something that there's been a lot of discussion about, but ultimately there needs to be. The media will pay attention to the protests. The media will pay attention. Unfortunately, to a certain extent, the media may pay a little less attention this time around. The Stewart News is owned by Gannett. Some of you may have seen this news in recent weeks. Gannett handed down an edict that they're going to start doing a lot less opinion. They are going to cut down on the number of letters to the editor that they publish. They are going to cut down on local editorials. Letters to the editor and editorials and columns like the one I used to write were a significant means of moving the story forward. Okay, because when everybody in this room writes a letter to the editor and the local newspaper is overwhelmed with letters from outraged citizen, it sends a message. But now there's going to be less of an opportunity to do that sort of thing. Nonetheless, I know the local reporters who cover this story for TC Palm, and some of the ones who cover it for the TV stations as well. If a disaster happens here, the media will be here. Okay, the media, as you recall from previous events, we had international media here. We had international coverage from some of these stories. It was in the New York Times. It was in the UK Guardian. It was that big of a deal. Okay, if it happens again, and we make enough noise, and the local media picks it up, and the statewide media, the regional media, the national media picks it up, it can be a similar sort of situation. Okay, so all of this is to just reiterate what Blair said. We have to make noise, but we need to have a thought too. Okay, how are we going to approach the media? Maybe in 2013, we had a Facebook post and 3,000 people showed up and the media caught wind of it, that sort of thing. There maybe needs to be a little bit more, okay, if we're going to have this event, who's in charge of reaching out to the media and letting them know it's happening? Where it is, when it is, that sort of thing. We need to sort of help them, because I'll tell you, the size of the newsroom just here in Stewart has been cut basically in half from what it was when I came here in 2016. There are literally half the number of people, tasked with covering this community. And frankly, some stuff falls by the wayside. So the easier you can make it for them to let them know what's happening, where it's happening, what they can expect, that sort of thing, the easier you make it for them to be there. And you want them to be there. You want them to be there. You need to make yourself available and be knowledgeable on the subject too. If a reporter approaches you about this, it's not, you can say, I'm angry, this stuff is stinky, this stuff ruins my boat, whatever it is. But if you have a little bit of additional knowledge about the subject and can speak a little bit more authoritatively, you're more likely probably to be quoted in those articles. You're more likely to help move the story forward. Okay. And as the crisis drags on, it sometimes can become less of a story. Or, if I'm the local reporter who wrote about this 2 months ago and it's still happening, I'm not going to write the same thing today. But it's important to look for, identify, and then let the media know about the other, I don't want to call them smaller stories, but when a dog dies from the algae, I say when, not if, that's a story. When someone has to close their business and lay people off because of what this has done, to their business, that's a story. When the real estate market crashes, the coastal, the homes can't be sold because who wants to buy a house with all this crap outside? That's a story. What's it doing to the local tourism industry? That's a story. When someone of the stature of a Rob Lord stands up and says, this is wrong, that's a story. Okay. So even as the crisis drags on, the story on day 50 isn't going to be the same as it was on day 1. Okay. On day 1, it's we're outraged. This is happening again. This community has already suffered enough. On day 50, it's look at what the effects of this have been. Okay. Those are the stories journalists, be it TV, radio, newspaper, internet, whatever it is. Those are the stories at that time journalists are going to be looking for. Okay. And if you are able to help identify those stories, if you know someone who, had offers on their house of $1 million prior to this and now can't get anything above 400 grand, because of everything that's happening, that sort of thing. If you have knowledge of these sorts of stories, if you can reach out to these reporters and say, hey, you might be interested in this, reporters are always looking for a story. Okay. But they're not going to want to tell the exact same story over and over and over and over again. Okay. So there needs to be a little bit of a strategy involved in how we approach this. Okay. And again, if you're part of an organization and if you haven't had these discussions, in my organization, Vote Water, and then Friends of the Everglades, where I'm policy director, we are having these discussions. If this happens, what should we do? What specific steps should we take? What should our messaging be? Who do we want to reach out to? That sort of thing. So if you're part of an organization, again, whatever it is, I would suggest you should maybe have some of those discussions and know what your message is going to be. Think about what your ask might be, what our ask should be. Okay. And think about, how realistic that is. Think about how that might be achieved. Think about the totality, I'll call it, of the story. Okay. Yes, the water's green. Yes, dead fish are washing up here, but there's more to it than that. As I just articulated in terms of the impact on health, public health, business, industry, that sort of thing. Think about that. Reach out to your local reporters. I know Max from TC Palm is probably watching this. Hi, Max. He covers a lot of these stories. Ed Killer, some of you might know Ed, covers a lot of these stories. Even with the cutbacks, those guys are interested in what's happening in this community, will be interested in what you have to say about these issues. Reach out to them. If you don't know them, send them an email and introduce yourself. Keep writing letters to the editor, even if there's a chance they might not be printed, because there's a chance they might be, and do everything you can to make your voice heard and, in the media. And hopefully then the media amplifies that voice and it produces change as it did in 2016.
Last but not least, the current status of the lake with Todd Thurlow, who is an attorney.
I am an attorney.
That's all.
So this is what I do on the weekends when I have a weekend. I'm walking back over to my laptop, and I apologize to the people that might watch this later on YouTube or people that are online right now, because my poor little laptop is actually recording this and hosting it and everything. And I'm trying to do this all at once, and I started the recording a little late. So being the last person, this is really just, they wanted me to give an update, which I have been kind of doing in all the meetings. So this is kind of like the update I give in the seagrass part of the meeting, but just to kind of tie, I'm listening to all the speakers before me and to tie it together a little bit. Starting off what Rob said about the smart politics. That has made a big change. And, how do you really move the needle on this stuff? At the end of the day, if our politicians don't move the needle, it's not getting moved. And why? Well, it's an educated public, and we're talking about educating people. And, that happened in these big blooms because people all of a sudden see their, river behind their house turn green, and they want to get educated really fast. And they get educated and they get really mad, and then they talk to their politicians, and then things move. And so that's what brought about my website, the Eye on Lake O thing, because Jackie was blogging on this stuff. We're trying to get this stuff on the internet so people can have access to the information, because an educated public moves their politicians. This stuff is facts. This is not opinion. I mean, we're talking about opinions in the paper, but I certainly hope they keep publishing facts, because this stuff is fact. It's not opinion. You know, the lake's green, it's a fact. And so let's look at some facts. Lawyers like facts and law. So let me use another hand here. So current lake conditions. The lake is at 12.93 feet right now. So as it was in last meeting, that's about the same place we were last year. So looking at today's status report from the Army Corps, it says 12.94, which is within 100th of a foot of where we are right now on my live feed. Looking at last year's report, we were at 12.59. So we're about at the same place where we were last year as far as lake level. And to me, that's good news. I mean, there's going to be a bloom in the lake. It's almost guaranteed. Mark and I have kind of talked over the last couple of years how it's kind of like the 4th of July. I mean, the 4th of July is when things explode, including the lake. And so looking at the current satellite imagery, there isn't, there is, this is the HAB imagery. Well, it's been Oh, I'm sorry. I'm like sitting here looking at my laptop and I'm not sharing my screen. So thank you, Mark. I'm trying to host and speak at the same time here. Let me share my screen. Now, how's that look? Is that a little better? So it's been cloudy the last couple of days, but back up a couple of days. For most of the last couple of months, there's been a return on the microsystem satellite imagery over on the west side of the lake. What does that mean? The lake is a little lower. You see the green on the natural imagery or the true color imagery. Perhaps it's because that's the aquatic vegetation over on that side. Perhaps it's because when the lake's lower, it gets kind of caught up over there and doesn't get caught in the wind going back and forth as the wind changes direction. But just looking at, let me zoom in on this. This is back in October. So this is what it looked back in October. This is the last July 1st. So there's your July 1st fireworks we seem to get every year, where the lake kind of explodes. And so, that's going to happen. That's the water quality issue we got to deal with. We got to stop the nutrients from coming into the lake so this doesn't happen in the first place. It's a good thing if it doesn't come to us. The lake is low and they don't have to open the gates. That's good, but the lake has still got a major problem. This is what it looked like in 2018. Just to put it in perspective, it's a little bit different imagery, but this stuff is nasty. So this is 2018 when I believe they were discharging at the time. So not only did it look like this, we were getting dumped. So that's what we don't want. We seem to be in a better place there. Looking at, and if anybody has any questions or wants to see anything in particular, fire away, because that's kind of what this is about. Trying to get up a level here. Yeah, let me just start over from my website. So I've got this screen share thing in front of me. Let me get that out of there. All right. So what's happened? I guess another thing I wanted to talk about, because these are the questions that I heard in the last week. I was out of town, but I was getting all the messages from my family about how everyone's rain gauges had like 9 inches or 7 inches of water in them and stuff. And so, I log onto my own website from the road to see, are they opening up the gates and stuff? And they really weren't. And so the question is what happened? Is it because the lake's low? Looking at this, I've added a couple of things to the website too. So if you all use this, you can go to this graph here, the C44, the C43 graph. I added a rainfall. If I can zoom out so you can see it. Down here in the data, so you see here, and I'll talk about this in a second, where the C44 was going back to the lake. So there's something that's different. Where the canal was high. Years and years ago, maybe in 2013, I think maybe they would have said, the canal's how we need to lower it. Let's just open up S80 and dump it on the St. Lucie River. And I think, they hear the voices a little more, and we're starting to change procedures and things. And it's like, well, the canal's higher than the lake, and, send it to the lake. And we'll talk, we can talk numbers if you want to, but I mean, this, in the grand scheme of things, this is minute amounts of water for the lake, but that's the water that would, damage the river. I mean, it literally, and I can show it to if you want, it's the amount of water that would evaporate in about 2 hours on the surface of the lake. It's 200ths of an inch of water when you put it over the lake. But over here I've got hyperlinks on here. So, this is what I was looking at from the road. It's like, okay, why aren't the gates open? Here's the next, radar imagery from the South Florida Water Management District. They have their own pages where you can navigate through it's radar. It's a rain estimate from the radar imagery. It's not, measured, but it's estimated by the radar imagery. So you kind of see we dodged a bullet when everyone was getting that rain the last couple of weeks. This is June 3rd. I think that's when the rains were happening. So there's, Jackie's rain gauge over there with 7 inches of rain in it, or whatever you said, Jackie. And you see the Kissimmee Basin really didn't get relatively as much rain at all. So had that rain been up there north of the lake, it would have been a totally different story. The lake would have been rising, much more. It rose a little bit, but not much. Jackie has a question.
To share, showing they told us that lower area where it was really red pink, kind of around Miami, Cutler Bay, basically 23 inches of rain.
So Jackie's saying that at the South Florida Water Management District, they were saying down south in the Miami area, there was 20 inches of rain, 23 inches of rain down there. And yeah, so, I have a couple of links that'll take you from my site, but go to the South Florida Water Management District or just Google SF, their initials, or, radar. And you can, anytime you have that question, you can go there and get the information. The information's all there. You can click on the basins and it'll show you the 20 inches of rain down there. So that's what I did a little bit later. Because one thing I wanted to kind of show to people, because the Caloosahatchee, and let's go back to the Caloosahatchee maybe real quick. As you see right now, the Caloosahatchee's getting 759 cubic feet per second. If you can see that, let me zoom slightly. But like right now, live as we speak, 759 cubic feet per second going to the Caloosahatchee. They've been getting, let's graph that. That's what it's been looking like. So you can see where it's gone up to 6,000 CFS almost, or 5,500 CFS. And so there's the question. So Jackie is saying, is that lake water? No, it's not. And so, why are they getting so much more than us? What's the difference between the St. Lucie and the Caloosahatchee? Because it is little apples and oranges. I mean, they're just the two estuaries that we both care dearly about. But Jackie's question was it lake water. So these two graphs will show you. Here's, and now I got to zoom out again. Here is the C43, which is the Caloosahatchee. And so green means lake, blue means basin. So you can see how they were getting, lake discharges as they were lowering the lake, during the season. But then around 5/28, May 28th, when those rains started, you see the orange line slam down to zero, because that's them shutting the S77 upstream at the lake. And then, they keep S79 open downstream, and all that blue is basin runoff. And so, what are these basins? And so it's talking about being an educated public. Again, I'm a lawyer. I do nothing about this stuff. And so it's just, learning what are they talking about? C-44, C-43, what are these basins? So let me give you some of my information. And I see a lot of experts online. They know a lot more about this stuff than me. So if anybody thinks I'm getting something wrong or has a question, please correct me, because that's what it's all about, So South Florida Water Management District, you go to their radar thing, you can download the tables of the rain data. So I'm like, okay. And so here's the Caloosahatchee Basin. Or is this not coming up on the screen? Maybe it's a little bit of a delay. What's going on here? My screen is not showing that. You know why? It's the screen share. I guess I got to share. Maybe I'm only sharing my browser. Give me a second here. I'm going to stop sharing. I want to share my whole screen, not just my browser. I just want to share my screen. Hopefully that's not going to cause that strange loopy thing. No, good. All right. So now when I pull up these pictures, hopefully they'll come up. Yeah. So this is just a snapshot of a spreadsheet I was doing a couple of minutes ago. So this is the Caloosahatchee Basin. So the basins that drain into the Caloosahatchee immediately, upstream of that S79 that you see all the blue water coming out. It's kind of, again, online folks, experts in the room, correct me if I'm wrong. There's kind of three basins that, sub basins, maybe they're called, that drain into that, and they have their acreage. So the total acreage of those basins is about 545,000 acres of land, that's getting rained on. That's then, causing that local basin runoff. So there's the rain totals right there year to date for those basins. So there's, 20 inches here, as Jackie's talking about, they got 20 inches in like one day maybe or something down south in Miami. But, weighted average of those three basins rains year to date. And I think this was on the 18th when I pulled this data, 20.6 inches. You multiply that by the time of acreage, lawyers can do math too. I'm a tax lawyer, so I do math. But 937,000 acre feet of rain fell on those basins. See this down below is the St. Lucie, so the St. Lucie and there's kind of a two sub basins that drain into that. And this is the St. Lucie Canal, not the St. Lucie River. See, the St. Lucie River has its own basins that it has to deal without the Okeechobee water or C-44 basin hitting us. So it's only 122,000 acres, so it's about, a fifth the size of the Caloosahatchee Basin. Plus we've gotten less rain, so that's why my math shows that, in that time period, we've got 156,000 acre feet of water, so much less water. So, we have not had the problem where they've had to, release quote unquote local basin runoff on the St. Lucie. But, back to that radar map, if it had rained much, more upstream, all these stories would be different. Or if the lake was higher, with the lake's higher, they can't send the water back to the lake. It's coming to the St. Lucie River. And so I had started that off as a graph, but this is what it looks like when you multiply, the lines are the rain graphs during that, and this is year to date. Let me show you just that rain event we had. This is the rain event. So this is from this month, and so the lines are the rainfall in inches. So you see the rainfall, how they kind of correlate to each other, east and west. But you notice how the light solid yellow is the acre feet, because it's a multiplier. So basically, when you have an inch of rain in the Caloosahatchee, you got 5 times as many acres. It's going to be 5 times as much water. So that's why there's just a tremendous amount of water coming out of the gates over there, and that's what happens. And so back, I guess I had already shown it, but it's not that bad right now. But when you were back a couple of days ago, it was it was in the 3,000 cubic feet per second and things like that. I think that's about all I was going to show as far as like current conditions. And I think I covered all my satellite imagery. Let me see if there was anything else up here, but if anybody has any questions, covered those. Oh. Yeah, one other quick thing on the website too. This is the daily so what do we need to do? We need to be ready to know that there's a bloom out there. So I think we got all eyes on it now. I mean, it was amazing how back Mark was talking about that first satellite imagery, and it kind of caught people off guard. It was like, whoa, what's going on out there? But everyone, we're all watching now, and we got the satellite imagery out there. But the first place you're going to see it is in that first set of imagery I showed you, the HAB stuff. And then, this is a one that's been on here for a long time. I just updated that because there's another satellite now. So now there's a NOAA satellite that went up about 2 years ago. So now this will give you 4 satellites live. They're black on top because they haven't passed today, but that's yet, the next row is yesterday's imagery. And so a lot of times that'll be the first place where you'll see the lake, kind of turning green, and then, something's going on out there. The different satellites. Jackie's question is, can I explain the different satellites? Well, well, what it is, I mean, there's a fleet of satellites between the European Space Agency and NASA and all our agencies that have their satellites up, looking down. And so I started by getting Landsat satellite imagery. Landsat is a higher resolution satellite that only comes by about every 16. It comes by every 16 days. There was Landsat 7. That thing's been broken for a while, and I guess they're still getting image. 8, 9 just went up. So there's kind of 2 good Landsat image satellites that go up, but they're only every 16 days. European Space Agency has the Sentinel satellites. The Sentinel satellite is what gives you the HAB imagery. So we're getting that stuff from the Europeans. We bring their data over here and run the algorithms on it. NOAA does that. That's where my website is getting that stuff from NOAA to make those images. There are different satellites of the same thing. There's high res that's less often. There's lower res that comes by every day. And so that's why you see the daily imagery on my HAB, because it's a lower resolution satellite, but it takes a picture of the entire globe every day. And so we also have lower resolution satellites that take an image of the entire globe every day. And the first one was Terra. And so that's the other thing I added, because this thing years ago, I added a date selector up there. So if you want to go back, like I put a button on there for you. So if you just want to click 2018 bloom, you go click, and it should back us up to 2018. And that's what it looks like when there's a bloom. Here in the room, the projector is not really showing it so great. You'll see it on your computer screen a little better, but it's very visible. Here's the 2016 bloom, but I put the dates up there when I added the NOAA satellite. So yeah, Terra was, online in 2000. Aqua was online in 2002. Sumi was online in 2015, and this NOAA one just went online in 2020. So that's the fourth column. That's why so you notice how when I backed up, the NOAA one's all black because it wasn't in the sky back then. So that's what that is. And so you can click on it every day, just like I do. That's what I do. I just go to this page and, you start to see how you see a little green happening, something's going on and we need to put more eyes on the lake. So that's what it's all about. Any other questions? All right.
Give it up.
Very good.
He's pretty amazing scientist for being a lawyer, right? Todd has come into this amazingly. I mean, when he started pulling all this data together, it's just amazing how he's actually processing more data than I think a lot of scientists out there in NOAA and the other agencies are doing. Todd's doing it all right here, and he's making it available to all of us to actually go and check this out. Now, it might be a little technical or highly technical for a lot of folks to understand, but that's what Todd and all of us need to try to do, is take that information and utilize that. So we have real time kind of information on when this is going to happen, what's going to happen. I think that's the big point. And what's been made points during the presentations are, what are we going to do about it? Just like Gil said, when this happens, not if, but when it's going to happen again, how are we going to respond, and what can we do about it? And when you look at the back of this agenda and you see our 105 organizations representing over 300,000 folks here in our community, I think this is the important key. How are we going to communicate this out, and what can we do to continue that story and continue that rally and that media to continue to push on this disaster that's happening, and how can we make changes to make it not happen in the future? Because we've got to keep the pressure on, and we've got to be ready when this happens again. So I appreciate all of the presenters pulling us together and doing this thing to get things going. We're going to get through our government agency updates. So we're going to start with Martin County, City of Stewart, and then go to Water Management District real quick and others. So brief updates. And we have Diane Hughes here with Martin County. We also have John in the back. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, John, or Mark. John's back there. I have yeah, that's not the first page though. Oh, next slide. I think we've all talked about what the lake level is. So I guess, yes, you can go to the next slide, Mickey. Thank you. So you could see in the past 7 days, we've had a mean inflow of 628 CFS. Just the previous 30-day mean inflow was 835 CFS. So that's kind of different. You can see the different basins. The light blue is the tidal basin runoff. The pink is the C44 basin runoff. And then you can see there's bright blue. You can see there's been no inflow from Lake Okeechobee. Next slide, please. So this is just some of the mid-estuary salinity levels at Speedy Point, where the bridge is. And you could just see the fluctuations and changes from July of 21 to where we are today. Next slide, please. So you can see we're in the good salinity range here for oysters. We kind of got up a little bit in the stress, but we're now in the good area for oysters. Next slide. This is the Enterococcus levels. We've been pretty good since the end of May. We had one little blip here on the 13th at the Roosevelt Bridge. But that was the last sampling that they've done, so I don't have anything else after that. And on June 6th, the Jensen Beach and Stewart Causeways were also in the good range for Enterococcus levels. So we're doing good because we haven't had much rain or water. Next slide. So these are just some project updates I wanted to tell you about what we're doing at Martin County. At Indian Riverside Park and Twin Rivers Park, we're going to be doing a living shoreline projects, and we're in the permitting process for that. And then we should be in construction for that by next summer. Our fertilizer ordinance is in effect for City of Stewart, Sewell's Point, and Martin County. There's some information and magnets back there on the table. Please take some. And don't forget to tell your neighbor to give it a break, a vacation for the summer on the fertilizer. We also have a resiliency working group. I've asked Mark to schedule a date with our county engineer for us to give you a full presentation on what the county is doing on resiliency. And then we're almost finished with our Old Palm City Ripple project. And there's a few brochures that you all got your brochures. There's a few left on the back. And the next slide, then my last slide. This is where Ripple is in Old Palm City. So this is Charlie Layton Park up in this corner. And then you come down to 28th Street. You walk all the way down here. This is site 1. It's a whole walking tour that you can do. Site 1 is up at the top, and then you walk and it comes down to site 2, where there's some bioswales and everything. Then you walk down here to site 3, which we found out there was a school bus pickup site there. So we've got a pavilion, and we're going to have a dock there, and there's a pond so kids can learn how to fish there. And then you keep walking and come down here right to the river's edge. And then there's another little detention pond down there. So Ripple is about how a drop of water becomes a river. Ripple. That's all I have.
Thanks. Next, Ben, we're little update City of Stewart. As Dan represented, the salinities are doing pretty good right now in the estuary. But Ben, give us an update around Stewart.
Good, I guess, afternoon, everybody. So I don't have anything to present, just wanted to give a brief update about where the LOSUM process is. We probably in the next month will start getting some more information from the Corps. It's been a little bit in a holding pattern the last 3 months. The City of Stewart, I know Martin County, a lot of other agencies have provided feedback on the operational aspect of LOSUM. That's basically what goes into the decision-making process once the actual plan had been identified. Remember Plan CC, and then that was modified a couple months later, and it's gone through a lot of different iterations of plan adaptation and development. And now we're in this operational component phase, and we still haven't received feedback yet from the Army Corps, but we know and we hope they're working very hard on modeling and simulating the feedback that we provided to them and looking at other possible ways to operate the lake under the same constraints that we had before with Plan CC. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of what we were talking about before, you've heard us talk about in the past, is when do you do lake recovery? We prefer obviously lake recovery to be when it's most probable, when you have a high degree of likelihood of actually achieving a lake recovery, drawing down the lake to 12, 11, 10 feet, whatever that number is, and staying there long enough, obviously, for the submerged aquatic vegetation, SAV, you'll hear it said, as for that to recover. And that provides obviously a great eco benefit to the lake. It obviously cleans the water, so that when we do get the water, hopefully it's a little bit better than what we might get otherwise. So staving off the algae, obviously that's not the full solution. And so what I will also mention is, apart from LOSUM, which is wrapping up at the end of this year, the Army Corps, Congress, everybody's going to get together, make sure it's good to go. And then hopefully sometime next year, we're in LOSUM operations from there on. But the City of Stewart hasn't stopped its advocacy just with Lake Okeechobee operations, which you've seen a lot of lately, but we're also, we've developed a sustainability action plan that deals with everything from obviously water quality and water quantity issues, but it also deals with everything that you might not think about that goes into water quality, like carbon. So carbon emissions, we're doing a greenhouse gas study right now, a gas emission study, I should say. So we're in the process of that for the next few months. Not to say that we're going to remove all the carbon from the Earth's atmosphere, but we're going to do our part. And it's important because the acidification of the water has a detrimental impact. And so long after we've achieved all of our goals with Lake Okeechobee, we're going to have to be dealing with other man-made impacts. City of Stewart isn't waiting until that point to start attacking these issues. We're doing it now. We're advocating, and we definitely appreciate everybody's support when we do that. And then the one other thing that we're doing right now is also a vulnerability assessment. So to plan for climate change. And it's important to have those discussions because as water rises, it's touching more human land. And as that happens and the water retreats, it's dragging in not so good things for the water. And so that will have detrimental impacts. And we need to start thinking about how to mitigate those risks as well. So thank you very much.
All right. Jackie, one question or quickly? Yep.
This is the appropriate place to talk about it, but 2 points. One is, would you like to talk about the reverse osmosis on the drinking water project that you're doing? And number 2, yesterday, the Board of Commissioners, there was a discussion about Stewart's construction and about covering over a lot of the wetlands. And perhaps you'd like to comment.
2 things about the wetlands.
One question about the wetlands, and that's a harder one for me to answer as a staff member only because that's really policy. I will say that it is something internally that we're talking about with development, but that's really comes down to advocacy with our commission and hearing what the residents have to say. The city of Stewart's pretty built out. We have, thankfully, with a lot of projects over the last 20 years, Haney Creek, that's a great restoration project that's still ongoing because there's different phases. So we've done a lot of restoration projects, which also included land acquisition with Martin County. The Florida Inland Navigational District has been involved in many projects. The St. Lucie Rivers Issues Team. So we've done a lot to, and again, that's a long history, and I'm not going to go into that all today, but it is a good question. It's something that we do like to talk about. And then to speak about the reverse osmosis plant, I didn't want to depress anybody to get into all the water quality issues, but yes, drinking water is something that's been on our radar since 2016. City of Stewart does have a contamination, a historic contamination from the use of firefighting foam. And so obviously I can't talk about the lawsuit that's out there, but there is a nationally recognized lawsuit that we're one of the bellwether states against the manufacturers of that product. But the good news is for anybody who lives here, who's a customer of our utility water, the city of Stewart didn't wait for a lawsuit. We didn't wait till all that to take action to mitigate and to treat that problem. As of 2019, July, our plant, actually it was May, I think, our plant was online and functioning and was removing the harmful contaminants, not just from our water supply, but also from the ground. So that's something we have been doing. The reverse osmosis plant is part of our alternative water supply project that's designed to over time substitute the surficial water that we've been drawing for years and years and years to drink. Over time, that's just going to improve all the water that we're drinking because we're pulling from untouched, man-made untouched water deep down 1,000 feet. And then we're also mixing that with the water we're treating at the surface. Overall, it's just improving the water quality. Of course, we've got one of the best tasting waters in the state. We've gotten that award many a time, so proud of that. But if anybody has questions, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to talk more in detail.
Good. Thank you for answering that question. Next is Jackie Thurlipish. Yeah. Go, Jackie.
Thank you. So I was very impressed with what you all chose as your topic today. And as I was watching today's meeting, I think there's a lot more that can be done with that. And just as an example, when I got to the South Florida Water Management District as a new board member, governing board member, I learned more about the Freddie. Have you ever heard about Freddie? Freddie is like the fake hurricane that the district plan every year. The whole, almost 2,000 people have to walk through what it's like if we get between a 3 and a 5 hurricane. And I mean, it's treated exactly like it's real. The technology, where the people work, what's going on. It would be fascinating for us to do that too, because I think it's really useful. I grew up in the era of bomb threats, And, you know, as kids, we used to have to know exactly where we were going to hide and how we were going to walk outside. And the thing is, that does make you more effective when there is a threat. And algae in Lake Okeechobee and the entire system is absolutely a threat to the St. Lucie River and to the health of humans and animals in our area. I thought I'd note a few things, even though this isn't my specialty, but since this is based on what we were talking about today, if there's a hurricane this year, I would think that we're in a little better shape because the Herbert Hoover Dike is almost finished. With the dike being almost finished, there's more flexibility for the Army Corps and the district in how they manage water. And, you know, that was something, that is why they had lures back in 2008, where they, you know, everything had to be a lot lower because they were afraid that dike would break. Well, they're feeling very confident about it now. And so that's a benefit to us. And that's great. We don't talk a lot about it, but I pay attention to it because I'm a big animal person. The ecological band in the lake, we don't put it up on the screen very much. I'm sure that Paul is very familiar with it. But if you follow that ecological band, we've had a good year. We've been in the ecological band with Lake Okeechobee until just recently. Now we've like popped out of the top and it's above it. But I know people want to, you know, we are afraid of that lake, and we should be, but we've really had a pretty good year in the ecological band for the lake. And the ecology being good for the lake is also good for people not getting destroyed. I talked about this last time, I think. The Army Corps and the district have a monitoring app now where they're monitoring the algae. They take pictures at S308 and other areas and they share it so they know where the algae is. So that's a huge thing. I mean, back when Todd and I'm writing my blog and Todd's doing all this stuff with his website and the satellites. I mean, they weren't paying attention, or if they were, it was staying in a room. Now they've got an app and they're watching the algae too. We have made a lot of progress. One of the things they're doing, which I don't know how I really feel about, just because I'm not a real chemical person, but they're treating the blooms chemically. If they see a bloom like down by S308, they're like, oh man, kill it, kill the bloom. So, and their theory is that if you treat it when it's small, it doesn't get bigger. But you all should be aware of that. When I called the district and asked for an algae report, it was interesting for me to learn, and I'm going to say it because we have to be transparent and think about things here. Lawrence Glenn, who is our in charge of ecological everything for the district, said there was some algae, but you know, none of it had a really high level, but there was an algae bloom in the C44 reservoir. So that was like, oh, that's pretty wild. An algae bloom in the C44 reservoir. He said, yeah, well, it's dying down. So, you know, it's going to break apart. But I know this is something we talk about a lot with all of the reservoirs, and something that we need to learn about, figure out. And, you know, like the C44 reservoir, the first SERP project ever done, the big ones anyway. I mean, $1 billion, huge thing. We got it. It's Martin County. It's fantastic. It's going to go online in 2023. So the water comes through the C44 canal. That was the idea originally, into the reservoir, and then goes out into the stormwater treatment areas and is cleansed. Okay. So how does that work if algae is forming or getting, you know, is in those reservoirs before they put it through the STAs? It probably clears up, but I think it's something to talk about. And I was very appreciative of Lawrence Glenn for telling me the truth. I'm serious, because in the old days, they probably wouldn't have told me. I wouldn't have been on the board anyway, but they wouldn't have told me. The C44, Todd, I think this is something that all of us should also kind of just think about when we're dealing with algae. And is the algae going to get us? You know, because that algae can get into the C44 canal because they let it go back and forth. I gave the example the other day of backwash. When somebody gives you their beer at the very end and they like, hey, you want to drink? My husband will say, you want to sip of my beer? I'm like, no, thanks. You know, it's like the very end of his beer and it's gone back and forth in his mouth. And it's the same for the water in the C-44 canal going out into Lake Okeechobee and then back and forth, back and forth. I think if that canal is like, I might be wrong, but it's like if it's higher than 14 feet or lower than 14 feet, I don't know, what is it, Todd? It goes into the lake and it's good. It's good. We don't get hit with this water when it goes. So it's like, yay, send the water to the lake. We don't need it. Why are they sending it in? They're sending it in for water supply because there's agriculture people that need the water for their crops. But I have to say that it's not kept very clean in there. They don't have to follow a lot of rules. It's ancient. It's from the 20s. The water goes in, they fertilize it, it comes out, it looks disgusting. They send it back into the lake, then it comes back in the C-44. So there's always a lot of algae right outside of Port Mayaca. I used to think it was always the lake. If I'm honest, I have to ask myself if it has something to do with that water coming back and forth, that backwash. And so what I have asked the district to do is to watch it. And also to maybe we can have like an algae center where we can try to fix the algae in that area. People have recommended like making islands out there or doing something because we don't have any plants like they have on the West Coast. So maybe we could do something for that algae center, but we need to think about that because it's real. The river looks awesome right now. I put out a blog post this morning. Oh my God. Turtles, manatees, living sand dollars. My husband flew over, our friend Scott flew over. It looks good. You can see the darkness from the rain, but you don't see the ugliness of when we have the discharges. Oh, thank you so much. The seagrass is starting to grow more. And I say that this is why we have to do our plan that you all got us to do today to you know, to be prepared for the threat of algae threat, to be prepared for algae threat. Why? Number one, because we are coming back to life. We are coming back to life and we cannot let them destroy it. And I will do everything I can not to let them destroy it. Nonetheless, we have to understand that we're part of this bigger system. I think you guys were concerned that the district, I read in your literature, didn't send enough water south during the dry season. I got the number. We sent 49,000 million acre feet. No, what would it be? 49,000 acre feet since I guess that would be October of last year. And we are working on sending more. The other component is, I know there's a lot of controversy about the EAA reservoir. It's not good enough, doesn't have enough STAs, whatever the thing is. It was raw. You spoke earlier, Rob, and I think also you spoke earlier about how if the paper had not done what it did, we probably wouldn't have gotten SB 10, Joe Negron. We wouldn't have gotten the EAA reservoir. We have got to start fighting for that EAA reservoir again. We have got to have them build it. That is our hope. They may send more water through the STAs eventually, but where they will send it if it gets built is through the EAA reservoir. I got reappointed by the governor like a month ago. I am going to make it my whole goal over the next 4 years to get this reservoir built. I am going to tape it. I'm going to visit. I am going to interview the Army Corps people and find out why it's not happening fast enough. I'm going to push my district. We have got to get behind the EAA reservoir because once it is in place, and it probably won't be till 2030, and I'll be really old then, but the water will go from the lake to the EAA reservoir and then south. We can't give up the fight. We are all exhausted. We've all done a great job, but keep fighting.
Well, it's great to have a little fire on board the Water Management Board, right? Thank you, Jackie, for doing that. Appreciate it. We're gonna kind of wrap up some other reports real quick. Did you have a quick question or something? No, okay, good. We are gonna, please get with Jackie. She is awesome. We do have some comments coming up at the end. Any other state agencies like FDP? I know the Corps emailed us. They appreciate, they couldn't make it. They have other meetings they had to do important today, so they are attending online, a couple of them. So appreciate their attendance and participation. Paul Gray, will he give an update to the lake, please? Any kind of quick updates about health of the lake? What's going on? 12.94.
Yeah, well, as Todd said, the lake's flattened out. It's not really rising. The watershed's either average rainfall or below average, so we got a lot of resiliency. But the risk of giving one more speech, we're working on a culture of clean water here. You guys are really leading the way. And I work for the Audubon Society, and we were started in the late 1800s because plume birds were being slaughtered for their feathers. Waterfowl were being shot for market, and their populations were plummeting. Bison were almost gone. Passenger pigeons were almost gone. And we were established because we didn't like the slaughter of animals. You know, it was senseless and it didn't make sense. And it took decades for us to get laws passed and for enforcement to start happening and for our culture to change. And right now, if you go out and shoot a snowy egret off your dock, someone's going to call wildlife. You're going to get arrested. You're going to get punished because our culture says it's not okay to slaughter animals. Our culture so far does not have a culture of clean water. People are still allowed to pollute. And we put up with it. And you guys, we are leading the charge and saying we need clean water, whether it's in the estuary, whether it's in the lake, whether it's in our watersheds. We have to have a culture where it's not okay for people to pollute water. And you guys are really leading the charge on that. So thank you. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take another generation probably, but we've got to get that as a part of Florida that we're going to have clean water. You know, I mentioned the blooms in Lake Okeechobee in the 1980s. They did the swim plan, they did the Lake Shore Protection Act, we have the BMAP now, and we're still not there. We got to do better. We have to have a cultural change, and you guys are really leading the charge. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Gil, you got, thanks, Paul.
Very briefly, and I won't give a speech. 1 week ago today, President Biden signed the South Florida Clean Coastal Waters Act. Brian Mass sponsored the House Representatives version, which will require the first ever federal assessment and action plan to combat harmful algal blooms in Florida. And then a few days ago, the U.S. House of Representatives approved the Water Resources Development Act. Has several provisions which would benefit people living on the Treasure Coast, including $100 million for Martin, St. Lucie, and Palm Beach counties for septic to sewer conversion projects, new wastewater and stormwater treatment facilities, provide more funding to help restore the southern portion of the Indian River Lagoon, speed up completion of the EAA. And here I'm reading from TC Palms. The most exciting section is NERP, the Northern Estuaries Restoration Program Mass proposal, which would require the Army Corps of Engineers to submit a plan within 3 years to eliminate Lake O discharges into the St. Lucie River and Indian River Lagoon. Until the plan is completed, the Corps would have to submit annual progress reports to Congress. So progress.
Thanks, Gil. That's, that NERP is part of the Water Resource Restoration Act. The Word of Act is now in Senate, and I expect it's coming out soon. Bradley's here from the Everglades Foundation and reported that that's going through the Senate, and hopefully that'll get done, and that'll be part of the Word of Bill, which will strongly do that. To wrap up, I think we have River Kids or Speakers Bureau. I know Todd's not able to be here. Local issues as far as that go, you see lake levels at 12.94. The C44 is at 14.04. So that's higher. So right now there's about 200 CFS going from this canal back into the lake, just as Jackie and Todd had iterated. The salinities are good all throughout the estuary, 18 to 25 parts per thousand right here at Roosevelt, and about 25 to 30 parts per thousand out at the Prairie Bridge in the outer estuary, which is good for oysters and seagrass. And so we have good salinities, but the water quality is still kind of messed up because a lot of that silt and sediment is stirred up, and the visibility in the inner estuaries are kind of reduced. They're not sending a lot of water south. All the structures, S351, 352, 354, and S271 are all zero, basically, but the STAs south in the EAA are all going are being drained down into the water conservation areas. And the water conservation areas are now above their schedule, slightly above their schedule, which means if we do get a situation in a lake, we won't have the capacity south of the lake to send it through the STAs and into the water conservation areas. And the reason is that a lot of that basin runoff, again, from the EA has been allowed to go through the STAs and into the water conservation areas to keep those areas well drained for their crop situation, which we continue to fight and try to get that storage and treatment better in the EAA, and not only with the EAA storage reservoir project, but we should require that of the EAA itself. I so appreciate everybody coming and doing this report. We have some updates. Oh, Nick is on Zoom. Does Nick want to do a report or any kind of update?
Yes.
Okay, Nick, there you are.
Yeah,
Look at
can you
that.
see me?
Yes, we can see you. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay,
Sorry.
so I wanted anyway, I'm Nick Mater with River Kids, and I wanted to tell everybody there is a community event this Saturday, and it's the Toxic Trail 37-mile ultra run that Will Glover puts on. He's been doing it for the past 6 or 7 years, and he has donated $6,000 to River Kids over these past 6 years. So this run does benefit the River Kids, and it is about the Toxic Trail all the way from Port Mayaca all the way to Stewart Beach. So it's 37 miles. And not that everybody can do that, but we can go out and support them. It's probably going to be done around 2 or 3 o'clock on this Saturday. So it is just in a few days. If anybody wants to sign up, Flagler Park tonight, 5 to 7 p.m. And there are really great t-shirts that they have. And they've just been very supportive, both Glovers. Sabrina Glover, his wife, is part of River Kids also. And I just thought that it's just a wonderful event. So to thank them and to come out and support if you can at Stewart Beach in the afternoon.
So they'll be at, Nick, they'll be at Stewart Beach in the afternoon at 3
Yeah.
or 4. Yeah. That
They'll start
conclusion. Yeah.
Sorry,
Go
they'll
ahead.
start the run at like 5 or 6 in the morning in Port Mayaca. But I do have some information, they're on the Facebook page. It's like Toxic Trail 37. And then if you Google it, you can find them. So
Right.
anyway.
Find the route and everything and
Right.
support that. Great. Fantastic. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Other local issues on the seagrass issues and stuff, we're working hard to try to redo some seagrass plantings. We put 200 units up in, with volunteer help, we prepared those up in Brevard County, as I reported. This week, they're doing assembly of another 1,000 units with volunteers. In fact, Mickey wanted to come out and help. And that's really a good thing. Those units will go up to Brevard County as well. And we've got sites here that we're looking at locally too, to try to increase not only oyster restoration, living shoreline, but with seagrass restoration as well. Permitting has been difficult getting that through, but I've got good news that tomorrow we've got the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service coming. Shannon Estenos actually will be here along with others, and the EPA. They have both committed. They're down in Big Cypress today. They're coming up to our area tomorrow to visit our nursery, a seagrass nursery. We're going to take them out in the boats, show them the seagrass, hopefully coming back and restoring, or where there used to be seagrass, so that they understand the issues and really help get behind it and support it. These are two federal agencies that in the past have not been very present in our area. Okay. The EPA needs to be, and so does U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So we're appreciative of them coming tomorrow. Any other further updates, Todd, with any other Riverkeeper updates? Jim Moyer's not with us today. Any other member comments or member things? Did you have a comment or wanted to make?
Kind of short. I'm Rick Hall. I live in a small apartment complex, and I see people come, I see people go all the time. I also bought a small boat. Now I put it in the marina. I have people coming up to me and talking to me. Well, what's wrong with the water? And so I tell them what I know. I had a construction worker, a guy who owns his own construction company. He was asking me where to go fishing. I don't fish. I don't know. And he says, and I started saying, well, the water, it's kind of, not too good, And he goes, I do a lot of construction work, Sailfish Point. And I try and talk to him about the water and he's a, they know nothing. And so it does change. So we do have to keep getting the message out. Call the newspaper. The best thing that ever happened to me was they had the seafood festival. Stewart News and TC Palms had a booth. You can sign up for $4 a month. Well, that's cheaper than you can buy the paper. And we've been doing this for 5 years now. And it's good that, you know, they do talk about it, but so everybody's got to, whoever they meet, you know, because there's so many people coming, can't do anything about the ones that leave. But got to just keep going.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it. Yeah, I wanted to say, I know, I appreciate City of Stewart Merritt bringing this sign, because what I started to see here and that around Stewart with the health department signs and stuff is now you're going to see these kind of permanent signs that are up. Okay. We used to, at first, we started putting signs up by the health department and others that right now there's an algae problem, you know, right now. So they put up the sign and then when it would go away, then they take it down. Right. But unfortunately, in those have been around for a long time here, we're starting to see these signs that are permanent. They're up all the time, just providing caution to anybody who sees an algae bloom, or if there may be algae in the water, there may be these toxins in the water. To me, that's a sad, sad state of affairs. What we really want to do is not have these signs up at all. We don't want any signs. We need clean water, just like Paul Gray said. We need to demand clean water, and we need all of us to get on board with doing that. And it starts right here, right now, with this communication and the media stuff that we need to prepare for when this event happens again. Don't let's accept these permanent signs that are up around our waterways that said, oh, by the way, caution, your water might be toxic with algae. That's unacceptable. We need clean water. All right, thanks everybody for coming. Talk to you later.